Hi, welcome to Marvel Standom. I'm not your host, Mike Cicchini. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today. In fact, I'm Den of Geek News and Features Editor Kirsten Howard. And with me, as always, are Den of Geek TV editors Katie Burt and Alec Bajallad. This week we're digging into Hawkeye episode 5, which is called Ronin. It's another fantastic installment in the latest Christmas-themed MCU show. Alec, give us the lowdown on what happened.
In Marvel's Hawkeye episode 5, we get to find out what happened to Yelena during the snap. Yelena and Kate then have a nice long chat in the present day about Clint, Ronan, and Natasha, and Yelena later reveals that Eleanor Bishop was the one who hired her to kill Clint. It turns out that Eleanor is pretty friendly with none other than New York Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, as Vincent D'Onofrio returns to the role he played so delightfully in Netflix's Daredevil, albeit in just a grainy photograph at the end of the episode.
Yeah, this was another great episode of Hawkeye. There was a lot of talking. In fact, there's a whole huge scene with Florence Pugh and Haley Steinfeld there. Like, it goes on for, I think I clocked it about 10 minutes. What did you think of the episode, Katie?
I really enjoyed it. I'm loving these long cold opens that give us insight into other characters. I mean, obviously we already knew Yelena, but seeing what she's been through since the end of Black Widow and what the experience of being blipped was like for her was really effective. And yeah, the scene between Yelena and Kate ended up being, I think, my favorite of the entire episode. Yeah, it's just two characters that I care a lot about and I've been anticipating meeting, but also two characters who obviously have very different perspectives on the current conflict, and I can understand where they're both coming from. And I'm not totally sure whose side I'm on.
You're right, Kirsten. This one was very talky, which I don't really mind. I will say, though, that that 10-minute scene I thought was acted really well and interesting. I don't know if a lot of the dialogue really grabbed me, though. It's one thing when Florence Pugh, whom we all love, is doing a Russian accent amongst characters who are also doing Russian accents in Black Widow. It just kind of sticks out a bit here. Just like, why can't poor Florence Pugh have a conversation with Haley Steinfeld without having to do her silly little accent?
Yeah. I don't know if either of you watched Killing Eve, but I just can't help but think about Killing Eve. Basically all through Black Widow and all through this episode, especially with Florence Pugh, another, British actress doing a Russian accent and having a very devil-may-care attitude in the process.
Yeah, she's basically doing like Villanelle. I don't know. It's a Villanelle impression. I don't know if it's a Russian accent or not. Maybe it is. I don't have a lot of Russians in my day-to-day life.
I did notice in Yelena's sort of dusting or blip, it was so fast. I don't think we've ever seen someone turn to dust and re-emerge so quickly before. It did seem really odd to me, though, that just after that, the previously on Hawkeye happened afterwards, and I was a bit thrown. Mm-hmm. Was that just my episode on Disney Plus, or did you guys get that too?
I did get that, and I did notice it. I think I liked it because none of that really had anything to do with... I mean, most of it had to do with, what's happening in the present day and what's happening with Kate and Clint. So it was... I don't know if I've ever seen that before, so it did stand out to me, but I liked it as a choice.
I loved it. I'm a cold open enthusiast, and I'm of the opinion that if you're gonna do a cold open, like, it has to be the very first thing that happens. I don't care how much previously on you have to get through. If you want a cold open, and then get down to business.
Ostensibly, they could have done a previously on the MCU for the cold open, giving us Yelena's backstory from Black Widow. They're just like, no, hopefully you watched this movie.
I hope this isn't the last we've seen of these two together. I mean, in Hawkeye in general, I hope that they're back together again in the future. One thing I really wanted to talk about was how, at this stage, the show really hasn't... It's just really not about Hawkeye, or it feels like he's the least interesting character with Yelena and Kate and Echo. This has almost become like a real female-powered show in a way. I don't know whether that was the intention. What do you think? Do you think this is just really about sort of letting Clint go into the background and bringing these other characters out?
Thematically, it seems to be a show about accountability, and I hope it's a show about accountability in a rewarding way. Not that you can't obviously do that with a lot of different male characters, but I do think that our story language tends to have, and also our real world sometimes, the people who have the most power tend to be men, and they often abuse that power in different ways, and we are often constructing like women as the victims, whatever that means. So it makes sense to me that like a show about accountability would center so many of these kinds of characters, especially women, who are often the ones being shown as the victims and being shown as the people who are hurt, whether that's realistic or not, to seek accountability or get justice for what they've lost and the pain or the trauma they've suffered.
I kind of agree with both of your points. Katie, to your end about women usually being the ones who I guess, quote-unquote, suffer in these or sideline characters. I think a fun play on that is Jack, who, by all appearances, I think is a patsy. Like, he couldn't possibly look more evil. He has this
He's like the chillest patsy as well.
Yeah.
Like, when he's
he
being
has,
arrested.
Like, a literal mustache that he can twirl. And he's based on, like, an existing comic book character. Everything about him screams, like, I'm important and I'm bad. But it literally just seems that they hired this very fun actor who is excellent at playing villains to just kind of like hang out for 5 episodes and get arrested and be like, oh, surely there's a mistake here.
I love the line, yeah, there's a mistake. I don't know exactly what it is, but I've never worked a day in my life. As a defense.
Definitely, it's far more of an ensemble than I thought it would be. Like, Jack plays a big role despite, it being revealed that he's basically probably nothing. We have so many of the tracksuit mafia have their own little weird personalities. Eleanor, Kate, Clint, Maya all feel like they're given not equal weight, but pretty close to it, like significant weight. Kirsten, to your point about like it not focusing particularly on Clint, I think that's just by design in the MCU. I think, like, the MCU is a shark. It only moves forward. Clint's story has been told. Like, he saved the world, like, half a dozen times, and then Natasha died. I just don't think this show was ever really gonna be about Clint, or at least his arc. And you can see that reflected in what his arc is in this, which is, again, I've said a million times, you just gotta get home by Christmas. It's just the easiest thing in the world. Just get home, bud.
I did love, the Russian accent was hard for me as well. I think I made a choice, both in Black Widow and here, where I was like, okay, just try not to think about it too much. But I do think there was some really good dialogue from Yelena in that scene, and one part I really liked is when, Kate was arguing that he's trying to protect her, which I think is true. And then Yelena said, no, he's trying to protect his reputation. And I think that's true as well. And I thought that was such an interesting insight and line, especially given Clint's decision later in the episode, which they don't really tell you what Clint's plan is in going to meet with Maya. And I wasn't sure if he was just going to kind of confess and like say, this was me. I'm here to accept the consequences of my actions or whatever. But that's not what happened. He went in as Ronin. He used his like physical power and skills to threaten Maya into protecting his family. I don't know. It seems like he's just kind of doing the same things, making the same superhero choices.
Is it that's transformative? If you do every single thing that Ronin would have done anyway, like take out a whole squad full of goons, dress in that hood, threaten people with the sword, and then you just stop just short of killing one person.
Which seems like one of the biggest like logic jumps we make with superhero storytelling. I mean, there's a lot. But the idea that you can inflict violence so precisely that you can make that choice, that you can choose whether to kill someone or not, is often a trope that we don't analyze, I think.
I'm glad you bring that up, because I had one more point from that fight, from Hawkeye v. Echo, Clint v. Maya. And I don't know why it struck me now, because this is a staple for like every superhero show, every action movie, but kicks. Like, people get kicked, and they just keep going. And like 99 times out of 100, like a kick is an end of a fight. Like 100%, it's like the PSI, or like the force generated in a human kick, is devastating. It will like just absolutely wreck somebody. But it just like, Maya and Clint are just like kicking each other like MMA fighters over and over and over again.
I also love how at the end of that fight, Maya just speeds away, and I was like, what about all of your goons? Like, are they okay? Do you want to check on them?
Regarding your kicks and punches must hurt, I think we need to, consider Con Air possibly the baseline for when we talk about that stuff. Nicolas Cage punches or a guy at the start of Con Air, and then he goes to prison because he kills him with one punch. And the MCU should just embrace just one punch killing or one kick killing. We don't need all the weapons. Nick Cage set a precedent, and we should respect it.
It's time we followed it.
Right. We also got our first glimpse of Vincent D'Onofrio back as Wilson Fisk. I assume they're saving his proper in-person appearance for the finale. It was fantastic to get him at the end of this episode. Now that he's in the mix, and considering everyone else who has a target on Hawkeye, what are your finale predictions?
I honestly hope that he is not too much of a factor in the finale. Like, I'm fine with him showing up and playing some role, but I also think that there's so many characters that I have become emotionally attached to, either as villains or heroes or something in between, within this show. I'd be much more interested in using narrative time to explore Eleanor's motivation and find out more about what her path has been. Because that was another one of my favorite episodes from this or favorite scenes from this episode, was the mother-daughter chat. That confrontation is the one that I'm most curious to see. This show has done such a good job of making everything really personal for the characters. Kingpin is very personal for Maya, so I think that it makes sense to bring him in that respect, but I don't want him to take up too much space just because he has such an important Marvel TV history / comic books history. That's easy for me to say as someone who did not watch Daredevil.
Alec, did you watch Daredevil?
I watched maybe 14 total episodes of Daredevil. Like 10 from season 1 before I got bored, and then like the Punisher episodes in season 2 before I got bored.
I did watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse though multiple times, so
I love a planet-sized Kingpin. That's my favorite thing in the world. The fact that this is a finale is more important than Kingpin. Therefore, like, Kingpin, I think we'll get a couple of scenes to tie him into the Eleanor conspiracy or what have you. But the emotional core of what this ending needs to be, and likely will be, is Kate confronting her mother. One thing I am curious about, because we were just talking about the physicality of all of this and, lethal kicks and everything. You would think there needs to be a fight of some sort in the finale. Like, who is fighting who? I couldn't, does Kate's mother, Eleanor have, martial arts experience?
God, I hope so. I would think Clint and Yelena have to have, I don't know. They have to fight in some way. Yeah,
there will be a Clint and Yelena scrap. But maybe Kate's climactic moment is just another conversation, this time with her mom.
What if Kate and Clint fight?
That'd be pretty rad.
Well, in the trailers, we've seen some clips of Clint in a suit, right? He's wearing a tux or something, and he's getting shot at. in what looks like a sort of restaurant or ballroom, and then we've also seen some clips of Clint and Kate in full purple and black costumes. It looks like they're surrounded in an ice rink. So I feel like there are going to be some action set pieces in the finale, but I really do hope they don't forget to give us some resolution of the emotional core of the story. And also, it's actually quite a lot to fit into the finale when you consider that Laura and the Watch and all this stuff that's going on. So I
completely forgot about the Watch.
Yeah. It seems like we're missing one episode. It feels like the finale should be 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I hope it's like a 2-hour finale. It's not going to be. It's going to come up and it's going to be like 33 minutes. And I'll just wonder how the hell. Yes.
And they're going to nail it.
They use the word superhero a lot in this show. Can anybody recall how often they use that, if at all, throughout the rest of the MCU? Because like we call them superheroes because we have comic books that have super heroic people in them with superpowers, but Clint's just a guy. He doesn't have any supernatural abilities, but he hangs out with superheroes. He's a superhero. I don't know. I'm very curious about the etymology of the word superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Well, can I leave you to do some research on that for next week, Alec?
No. I think this is a fairly funny episode. We mentioned Jack saying that he'd never worked a day in his life earlier. What a comedic powerhouse of a performance that was. I love Kate throwing a sriracha bottle at Yelena. Mm-hmm. Yelena, they're then just dousing boxed mac and cheese with said sriracha bottle.
Also, Yelena just asking Kate for, like, tourist tips.
Yeah.
Which I think might come into play next week. I don't know.
It's a shame that Mike's not here because I wanted to ask him about, because Kate's first suggestion was the High Line, and I don't think a New Yorker would immediately suggest the High Line to somebody. I just want to say my favorite line of the episode is,
yeah, I know what boxed mac and cheese tastes like. Okay, I know it's delicious.
Funny episode. Thumbs up.
There was also a connection to Spider-Man No Way Home in there. We've already had Rogers the Musical pop up in the opening minute of Spider-Man No Way Home that was released. But in this episode, they reference that the Statue of Liberty has been revamped or has a new look. And we've also seen in the No Way Home trailer that she is now holding Captain America's shield.
Yeah, it's very cool to see those kinds of real-time, might be the wrong phrase here, but real-time connections between the feature world and the TV world. You know, as someone who did watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and some of the subsequent Marvel TV shows that weren't on Netflix. Yeah, you know, that's always been like a weird thing, figuring out how to weave those two worlds together to make them feel like one, or just choosing not to. So to see this era of Marvel TV do that so incredibly well, you know, in the previous version of Marvel TV, it feels like this would have been like the closest we got to a connection. But here, this feels like the kind of like the loosest in a way. You know, we have these characters who are crossing over from the movie world to the TV world, and who are just as integral to both. It just kind of made me reflect on how much the MCU has changed and how much Marvel TV has changed over the last, almost 15 years.
That's it for this week's Marvel Standom. We'll be back very, very soon, of course, covering Spider-Man No Way Home and the finale of Hawkeye, which is next Wednesday. Please, please, please like and subscribe. We're a small outfit here and need your support. In the meantime, you can also find us on our web home of denofgeek.com, where we write about the MCU in much more detail. You can also hit us up on Twitter at Marvel Standom or at Den of Geek US. And if you've had enough of watching us, you can also follow Marvel Standom on Apple and Spotify as a podcast. See you soon.
Please, let me put on brass knuckles so I can punch your face.